Samuel Little, Belle Gunness, Arthur Shawcross, Rodney Alacala, Gary Heidnik, Joseph James DeAngelo Jr., Cleveland Torso Murderer, Eric Edgar Cooke, Richard Kuklinski, David Parker Ray, Luke Woodham, Michael Carneal, Charles Roberts IV, Wellington Menezes de Oliveira, Evan Ramsey, Eric Houston, Robert Steinhäuser, Marc Dutroux, Patrick Wayne Kearney, Paul Knowles, Bruce George Peter Lee, Arthur Hutchinson, Mikhail Popkov, Israel Keys. These are the serial killers from today's layer. Watch until the end if you want to know more about them. Welcome. Today we are going to continue the serial killers and mass murderers iceberg. This is layer 4. Check the first ones if you haven't seen them. The iceberg was made by 777. Samuel Little, born as Samuel McDowell on June 7, 1940, was an American serial killer who admitted to murdering 93 people, mostly women, between 1970 and 2005. The Federal Bureau of Investigation's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, VICAP, has confirmed his involvement in at least 60 of these murders, marking him as the most prolific serial killer in United States history in terms of confirmed victims. Belle Gunness, born Brynhild Paulsdatter Storseth on November 11, 1859, and known as Hell's Belle, was a Norwegian-American serial killer active in Illinois and Indiana from 1884 to 1908. Gunness is believed to have murdered at least 14 people, primarily men whom she lured to her rural Indiana property through personal advertisements. Some sources suggest that her total number of victims may be as high as 40, placing her among the most prolific female serial killers in history. Although Gunness is believed to have died in a fire in 1908, there is widespread speculation that she may have faked her death, and her actual fate remains unknown. Arthur John Shawcross, also known as the Genesee River Killer, was an American serial killer active in Rochester, New York, from 1972 to 1989. Initially convicted for the murders of a young boy and girl in Watertown, New York, Shawcross served 14 years of a 25-year sentence after a plea bargain. Following his early parole, he resumed killing, primarily targeting prostitutes in Rochester between 1988 and 1989. His release sparked controversy, with Dr. Michael H. Stone citing him as a glaring example of unwarranted prisoner release. Shawcross died on November 10, 2008, while serving a 250-year sentence for his crimes at the age of 63. Rodney James Alacala, born Rodrigo Jacques Alcala Bucher on August 23, 1943, was an American serial killer and offender sentenced to death in California for 5 murders committed between 1977 and 1979. He also received a 25-year to life sentence after pleading guilty to 2 additional homicides in New York State in 1971 and 1977. Although definitively linked to 8 murders, Alcala's actual victim count is believed to be much higher, potentially reaching 130. Alcala amassed a collection of over 1,000 photographs depicting women, teenage girls, and boys, many in sexually explicit poses. In 2016, he was charged with the 1977 murder of a woman identified from one of his photos. Alcala was known for assaulting photographic subjects and using brutal methods, often strangling his victims until they lost consciousness and repeating the process before killing them. This gruesome behavior earned him the description "a killing machine" by a police detective, with comparisons to notorious serial killer Ted Bundy. Alcala became known as the dating game killer following his 1978 appearance on the television show The Dating Game amid his killing spree. He died of unspecified natural causes in 2021. Gary Michael Heidnik, November 22, 1943 to July 6, 1999, was an American murderer and serial who kidnapped, tortured, and raped 6 women, killing 2 of them, while holding them captive in a self-dug pit in his basement in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Heidnik's brutal acts earned him a death sentence, and he was executed by lethal injection in July 1999, making him the last person executed in Pennsylvania as of now. His gruesome behavior and methods were part of the inspiration for the James Buffalo Bill Gum character in The Silence of the Lambs. Joseph James DeAngelo Jr., born November 8, 1945, is an American serial killer, and burglar responsible for at least 13 murders, 51 and 120 burglaries across California between 1974 and 1986. He earned various nicknames throughout his crime sprees, such as the Visalia Ransacker, East Area Night Stalker, and Original Night Stalker, before DNA evidence revealed he was the same person. DeAngelo's crimes spanned decades and involved kidnapping, assault, and murder. He taunted victims and police with obscene calls, instilling fear across the state. Forensic genetic genealogy led to his capture in 2018, with additional charges of kidnapping and abduction attempts brought in August 2018. On June 29, 2020, DeAngelo pled guilty to multiple counts of murder and kidnapping, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The Cleveland Torso Murderer, also known as the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run, was an unidentified serial killer responsible for at least 13 dismemberment murders in Cleveland, Ohio, during the 1930s. The remains of the victims were found in the impoverished neighborhood of Kingsbury Run, with most victims originating from an adjacent area known as the Roaring Third, or Hobo Jungle, notorious for its bars, gambling dens, brothels, and vagrants. Despite extensive investigations, including one led by the famed lawman Eliot Ness, the murderer was never caught. The killings were marked by their brutality and the dismemberment of victims, making the case one of the most notorious unsolved mysteries in American history. Eric Edgar Cooke, born on February 25, 1931, in Perth, Western Australia, was a notorious serial killer responsible for a 4-year spree of violence, involving hit-and-runs, stabbings, strangulations, and shootings. His troubled childhood, marked by abuse from his alcoholic father and a cleft lip and palate, likely contributed to his later crimes. Cooke's early criminal activities included petty theft, arson, and vandalism. After a brief stint in prison, he became more methodical, using gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints during burglaries. His murder spree involved various methods, making it difficult for authorities to connect the dots initially. Cooke's arrest came after police set a trap with a rifle linked to one of the murders. Following his capture, he confessed to 8 murders and 14 attempted murders, demonstrating a detailed memory of his crimes. He was convicted of willful murder and sentenced to death. Cooke was executed by hanging on October 26, 1964, becoming the last person to be hanged in Western Australia. Despite claiming insanity during his trial, the court ruled him sane, and Cooke chose not to appeal his sentence, stating he deserved to pay for his crimes. Richard Leonard Kuklinski, known as the Iceman, was an American criminal and convicted murderer. He ran a burglary ring and distributed pirated pornography, but he was best known for committing at least 5 murders between 1980 and 1984. He earned his nickname by freezing the body of one of his victims to hide the time of death. He typically lured men to meetings with promises of lucrative business deals, then killed them to steal their money. He also murdered 2 associates to prevent them from becoming informants. Kuklinski was arrested in December 1986 after an 18-month undercover operation. He was convicted of 4 murders in 1988 and sentenced to life imprisonment. In 2003, he received an additional 30-year sentence after confessing to the murder of a police officer. Although he claimed to have killed up to 200 people and worked as a hitman for the mafia, these claims remain uncorroborated. He died on March 5, 2006. David Parker Ray, known as the Toy Box Killer, was an American kidnapper, torturer, serial and suspected serial killer. Although he was accused of killing several women and suspected of murdering up to 60 from Arizona and New Mexico, no bodies were found, and he was never convicted of murder. Ray used a soundproofed semi-trailer, his toy box, for sexual torture, kidnapping about 4 or 5 women a year and holding them captive for 2 to 3 months. He subjected them to severe abuse, often involving surgical instruments, and sometimes his wife, friends, or even his dog. Before abandoning the victims by the roadside, Ray would drug them to erase their memories. Convicted of kidnapping and torture in 2001, he died of a heart attack in 2002. The Pearl High School shooting occurred on October 1, 1997, when 16-year-old Luke Woodham killed 2 students and wounded 7 others at Pearl High School in Mississippi after murdering his mother earlier that day. Woodham attacked his mother at home before driving to his school with a rifle concealed under a trench coat. He fatally shot 2 students, including his former girlfriend, and wounded 7 others. He was detained by the school's assistant principal, Joel Myrick, who retrieved a gun from his vehicle and stopped Woodham as he tried to flee. 6 other students were arrested on conspiracy charges due to alleged involvement in a group called the Croth, though the charges against the minors were later dropped. Woodham faced separate trials for his mother's murder and the school shooting, both resulting in life sentences. He is currently serving 3 life terms and 140 additional years in prison, with parole eligibility in 2046. The Heath High School shooting happened in West Paducah, Kentucky, on December 1, 1997, when 14-year-old Michael Carneal opened fire on his classmates, killing 3 and wounding 5 others. Carneal hid a shotgun, rifle, and loaded .22 caliber pistol in a blanket and his backpack. He shot 10 times, hitting members of a student prayer group. Afterward, he surrendered to the school principal, expressing disbelief at his actions. Diagnosed with schizophrenia, Carneal pleaded guilty, receiving a life sentence with possible parole after 25 years. His parole was denied in 2022, effectively giving him life without parole. The families of the victims reached a $42 million settlement, but his family's insurance company denied responsibility. A lawsuit alleging media violence contributed to the shooting was dismissed in 2002, with the court finding no clear link between violent entertainment and Carneal's actions. On October 2, 2006, a shooting at the West Nickel Mines School, an Amish one-room schoolhouse in the Old Order Amish community of Nickel Mines in Bart Township, Pennsylvania, resulted in the death of 5 girls and injury to 5 others. The perpetrator, Charles Carl Roberts IV, took hostages and shot 10 girls between the ages of 6 and 13 before committing suicide in the schoolhouse. The Amish community's focus on forgiveness and reconciliation in response to the tragedy gained national attention, demonstrating their values of compassion and mercy. Following the incident, the West Nickel Mines School was demolished, and a new schoolhouse, the New Hope School, was constructed at a different location. On April 7, 2011, Wellington Menezes de Oliveira entered the Tasso de Silveira Municipal School, an elementary school in Realengo, on the western outskirts of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and opened fire, killing 12 students aged between 13 and 15 years old, and seriously wounding 22 others. This was Brazil's first non-gang-related school shooting with significant casualties. Although authorities found no concrete religious or political motives for Oliveira's actions, texts discovered at his home indicated an obsession with terrorist acts and Islam, which he converted to 2 years before the attack, after being a Jehovah's Witness. In his final wishes, Oliveira requested burial in accordance with Islamic traditions and asked for Jesus' eternal life and God's forgiveness for his actions. On February 19, 1997, 16-year-old student Evan Ramsey carried out a school shooting at Bethel Regional High School in Bethel, Alaska, killing 2 people and injuring 2 others. Ramsey used a shotgun to shoot 15-year-old Josh Palacios, who later died from his injuries, and injured 2 other students. He then shot and killed the school's principal, Ron Edwards. Ramsey surrendered after a brief standoff with police. Reports indicated that Ramsey had been frequently bullied at school and had a history of abuse, both at home and in foster care. His troubled upbringing and psychological trauma were believed to have contributed to his actions. Ramsey was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts of first-degree attempted murder, and 15 counts of third-degree assault, receiving 2 99-year prison sentences. He will be eligible for parole in 2066. Ramsey's case received media attention, with his father attributing the shooting to the video game Doom during interviews. The Lyndhurst High School shooting occurred on May 1, 1992, in Olivehurst, California, where 20-year-old Eric Houston, a former student at the school, opened fire, killing 4 people and injuring 10 others. His victims included 3 students and 1 teacher, with 9 students and another teacher wounded. After a siege, Houston eventually surrendered to police. Houston was convicted of the murders and sentenced to death. He is currently on death row at San Quentin State Prison in California. The shooting was one of the deadliest high school shootings in the United States until it was surpassed by the 1999 Columbine High School massacre. The Erfurt Massacre was a school shooting that took place on April 26, 2002, at the Gutenberg Gymnasium in Erfurt, Germany. Robert Steinhäuser, a 19-year-old expelled student, shot and killed 16 people before committing suicide. His victims included 13 staff members, 2 students, and 1 police officer, with 1 other person wounded by a bullet fragment. Steinhäuser primarily targeted teachers and administrators, ignoring students, although 2 students were unintentionally killed by shots fired through a locked door. The shooting spree lasted no more than 20 minutes, with Steinhäuser ultimately taking his own life in an art supply room. He used a 9mm Glock 17C pistol and had a shotgun that was inoperable due to a prior handling error. Steinhäuser had a troubled background, including a history of declining academic performance, expulsion from school for forgery, and potential obsession with the Columbine High School massacre. Marc Dutroux is a Belgian serial killer, and child. In 1989, he was convicted of abducting and raping 5 young girls, but was released on parole after just 3 years. Arrested again in 1996, he was found guilty of abducting, torturing, and sexually abusing 6 girls aged 8 to 19, 4 of whom died. His 2004 trial led to a life sentence. Dutroux's accomplices included his wife Michelle Martin, sentenced to 30 years, and Michel Oliveira, sentenced to 25 years. Bernard Weinstein was killed by Dutroux before trial, and Michel Nihal was acquitted as an accomplice due to lack of evidence but received a 5-year sentence for gang-related charges. Public outrage over his lenient first prosecution and police errors led to a major reorganization of Belgium's law enforcement. The White March in 1996 saw 300,000 Belgian citizens protesting the mishandling of the case. Patrick Wayne Kearney, born in 1939, was an American serial killer known as the Freeway Killer. He confessed to murdering at least 28 people, mostly young men and boys, by picking them up from highways or gay bars, then shooting them in the head. He would then dismember the bodies and dispose of them in trash bags, canyons, or other secluded areas. Kearney's spree began in 1962 and intensified in the 1970s, with nearly monthly killings. He used necrophilia and mutilated the bodies post-mortem. His capture in 1977 followed the murder of John Otis LeMay, which led police to Kearney and his partner, David Hill. Hill was eventually released, while Kearney confessed to avoid the death sentence. He received 21 life sentences and is incarcerated at Mule Creek State Prison in California. Paul Knowles was a serial killer who committed a series of violent crimes across the United States in 1974, following his escape from police custody in July. His criminal activities spanned 4 months and involved multiple states. Knowles' crime spree included the murder of various victims through strangling, stabbing, and shooting, sometimes with elements of sexual assault. He was captured on November 17, 1974, after a high-speed car chase and a foot pursuit in Georgia. During transportation, Knowles was fatally shot by a Georgia Bureau of Investigation agent while allegedly attempting to grab a deputy's gun. Peter George Dinsdale, later known as Bruce Lee and then Peter Tregett, was an arsonist from Manchester who admitted to setting multiple fatal fires in Hull, England. Born with congenital spastic hemiplegia, he grew up in children's homes and faced physical disabilities and social challenges. In 1979, Lee set a fire at the Selby Street home of the Hasty family, killing 3 brothers. He confessed to this and other fires, claiming he had grudges against some victims while others were random acts driven by a fascination with fire. Lee was convicted of 26 counts of manslaughter and 11 counts of arson in 1981 and was detained in special hospitals. In 1983, a public inquiry led to 11 of his manslaughter convictions being overturned, citing an accidental cause for 1 fire. Lee has since claimed innocence, leading to a new appeal in 2021. The Court of Appeal acquitted him of 2 counts of arson and 3 of manslaughter in 2022, questioning whether his physical disabilities and mental state made his confessions unreliable. However, most of his original convictions still stand. Arthur Hutchinson, born in 1941, is a convicted English triple murderer. On October 23, 1983, he broke into a house in Dore, Sheffield, killing Basil Leitner, his wife Avril, and their son Richard. He also raped their 18-year-old daughter Nicola at knife point. After a brief manhunt, he was caught and sentenced to life imprisonment, with a whole life tariff imposed, meaning he would never be released. Hutchinson's appeals against this sentence, including to the European Court of Human Rights, have been unsuccessful, confirming his life sentence without parole. Mikhail Viktorovich Popkov, born in 1964, is a notorious Russian serial killer and necrophile responsible for the assault and murder of 78 women between 1992 and 2010 across Angarsk, Irkutsk, and Vladivostok. Popkov, known as the Werewolf and the Angarsk Maniac, for his brutal modus operandi, extensively mutilated his victims and engaged in necrophilia. His background as a former police officer and security guard facilitated his crimes, making him the most prolific serial killer in Russian history. In 2015, Popkov was convicted of 22 murders and sentenced to life imprisonment. He confessed to 59 additional murders in 2018, leading to his conviction for 56 of them, with 3 lacking sufficient evidence. Given a second life sentence, he will spend the rest of his life in prison. Although calls for his execution were made, Russia's moratorium on capital punishment prevents this. Israel Keyes was an American serial killer, bank robber, burglar, arsonist, kidnapper, and sex offender, active across the United States from July 2001 to February 2012. He is confirmed to have murdered at least 3 people, but is suspected of killing between 11 and 20, with a series of other felonies, including armed robbery, arson, and burglary. His violent crimes span multiple states, showcasing a high degree of planning and meticulousness. Keyes' crime spree ended with his arrest in 2012, but while awaiting trial, he took his own life by slashing his wrists and hanging himself. The circumstances of his suicide and the evidence found in his jail cell, including a suicide note, drawings of 11 skulls, a Baphomet symbol, and the word Korozal, have led the FBI to believe he could be responsible for up to 11 murders. Keyes admitted to committing violent crimes from as early as 1996, notably an aggravated sexual assault of a teenage girl in Oregon, indicating a long-standing pattern of criminal activity. Thanks for watching. Leave a like and subscribe so you can be notified when the next video drops.